church where no perfect people are allowed. It's more important to be one than it is to be right. Our dream is to help you build yours.
I want to take you on a bit of a journey back in time. Back before the 1800s, back before the Middle Ages, back before even the Roman Empire. Back at a time when Rome was just a tiny hamlet and even the Greeks had just barely learned how to read. Back during the height of the Persian Empire. Now at that time, 2,500 years ago, the Persian Empire was the mightiest civilization the world had ever seen. All the great civilizations before it, the Egyptians, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Hittites, had all fallen underneath the boots of Persian soldiers. Their empire stretched all the way from India straight on through to Ethiopia, spanning 3 different continents, 127 different provinces. And at that time, the most powerful man in the world was a man named Xerxes. King Xerxes had absolute power. What he said was law. When he said jump, you jumped. When he said come, you came. Actually, if you came and he didn't call you, that was an automatic death sentence. And behind him, he had the largest army the world had ever seen, an army known as the Persian Immortals. Greek historian Herodotus records that when the Persian Immortals would unloose a flight of arrows, the arrows were so numerous, it would darken the sun. Herodotus also says that Xerxes' might and power was only matched by his carnal appetites. Well, in the 4th year of Xerxes' reign, Xerxes did something that no one has ever done since. He threw the greatest party in recorded history. Back at his winter palace in Susa, and just letting you know, he had 2 capitals of the empire, and he would move the capital depending on the weather. Just imagine Stephen Harper saying, you know what, Ottawa's nice in the summer, but in the winter, let's move the capital of Canada to Cancun. Well, that's exactly what Xerxes would do. He would move the entire seat of government from Persepolis to Susa, because it had nicer weather in the winter. The courtyard of Susa was the size of a football field. Not an American football field, but a 65% larger Canadian football field. It had massive pillars all around, decorated in white and blue and silver. And the floor of this massive courtyard was one gigantic mosaic. Not a poor man's Roman mosaic made of broken pottery, but one made out of precious jewels. This party, he invited all his nobles, all his officers, all his generals from all 127 provinces to come and have this massive celebration of unlimited wine, women, and song. And this party, which had thousands of people at it, started, I imagine, at 6 at night. I mean, that's when parties kind of start. And went on through the evening, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock. Now, I don't know about you, but when a party goes to 12 o'clock, that's, pretty big deal for me. But this is the greatest party in human history. It went after 12. 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. Now, when I was in university, a party that went to 3 o'clock was a pretty big deal. It went to 4, to 5, to 6, to 7, to 8, to 9, to 10, 11, 12 noon. People who've passed out the night before are now waking back up and rejoining the party. Into the afternoon, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 24 hours, nonstop partying. Now, that's a big deal for a lot of people, but it kept on going. Into the next night, through the next evening, morning, afternoon, 48 hours, a complete nonstop weekend party. And kept on going for 3 days, for 4 days, for 5 days, to 6 days, to 7 days. Well, spring break is known as a pretty big deal, and that goes for 7 days. I don't think anybody does it nonstop. But that wasn't enough for Xerxes. 8 days, 9 days, 10 days, 11 days, 12 days, 13 days, 14 days, 2 weeks, non-stop 24/7 party. 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, 7 weeks, 8 weeks, that's 2 months. 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. The greatest party in human history went for 6 months. Non-stop wine, women, and song. Gold goblets, jewelry. It was amazing. And at that end of that party, Scripture records that Xerxes was drunk. Who knew? Didn't see that one coming. And he's hanging out with his boys, and he's bragging about how beautiful his queen is. And he gets this idea, hey, let's have the queen come out here, parade around in nothing but a crown and let everybody gaze upon her beauty. Seemed like an idea. However, Queen Vashti wasn't quite that drunk. And I imagine that Queen Vashti thought, hold a second, I am the queen of the greatest empire the world has ever seen. I'm not some cheap tart to be paraded around a bunch of junk and idiots. So she didn't come. And for the first time in Xerxes' life, somebody had disobeyed. And he didn't know what to do. Why that woman, she's what? He didn't know what to do. And he asked his wise men, what do I do? And the wise men said, King, this is serious stuff. This isn't just a personal insult against your greatness. This is undermining civilization as we know it. For if your wife can disobey you, the greatest man who's ever lived, how's my wife going to treat me? How are all the wives in the empire going to treat their husbands? Next, they'll be getting driver's licenses. They'll be voting. They'll be demanding to hold the remote control. This is the end of the world as we know it. What you need to do, O king, is banish your wife forever. Unchangeable law, she's gone forever. And so that's what he did. Banished Vashti forever. Well, a week goes by, and Xerxes feeling a little lonely. He's looking for a little bit of loving, but he doesn't have a wife anymore. And all of a sudden, these wise guys ain't looking so wise. And he explains to them, Xerxes is unhappy. And when Xerxes gets unhappy, Xerxes gets upset. And when Xerxes gets upset, Xerxes gets angry. And when Xerxes gets angry, people die. Well, the wise guys were quick to an idea. They said, hey, no problem, king, no problem. We've been talking down to the guys at PBS, the Persian Broadcasting Corporation. And they've got a new show. We're calling it The Bachelor. What we're going to do is we're going to send scouts out to the whole land to find the most beautiful women in the empire, all the way from India straight through to Ethiopia. And what's going to happen, O king, is we're going to give these women a year's worth of beauty treatments, special training in the erotic arts, and then every night you're going to get to sample a new woman until you find one that can replace Queen Vashti. And Xerxes says, well, it is pretty good to be the king. Let's go ahead and do that. So scouts found out across the empire. Now, at the other end of the empire, far away from the riches and glory and power that Xerxes had, was a teenage girl named Hadassah. Now, Hadassah had 4 huge strikes against her. First, she was a teenager in a culture that really didn't care about teens. Second, she was a woman in a civilization that really didn't care about women. Third, she was a Jew in a country that really didn't like Jews. And then lastly, she was an orphan. Now, ordinarily, someone in her situation would have been sold to slavery or taken advantage of in some way. But fortunately for Hadassah, she did have an older cousin who decided to take her under his wing. His name was Mordecai, and he looked out for her. But when the scouts arrived, there was nothing Mordecai could do. And they pulled out all the young women of the town, and they all lined them up, and the scouts, sort of evaluated them, said that, yeah, you'll do, nah. Hey, honey, maybe you should shave. Maybe shave your back. Yes, and you know what? Oh, this one will do just fine. And she was taken off to Susa. Mordecai, again, still feeling responsible, followed her. Now, she went through a year's worth of special diet and beauty treatment. The Persians had learned that the way you smell is affected by what you eat. So they prepared a special diet for these women so that the sweat off their brow would taste like honey and smell like roses. And then on Hadassah's night, she went to see the king. Now, Mordecai had warned her, said, you know what, hide your Jewish identity. Don't go by Hadassah anymore. Take a Persian name. Have everybody call you Esther. So that's what she did. And that night she went to see the king, and scripture is discreet here, but the king was pleased and decided to make her the new replacement queen instead of Vashti. Meanwhile, with Mordecai, he managed to get the job at the palace, and there was actually a little bit of action going on here. There was 2 palace guards who guarded Xerxes' room who had planned to assassinate him. Mordecai got wind of this and actually, uncovered this big, assassination attempt. He didn't get rewarded or anything from that, but he got some job security. Well, our story doesn't end there. A few years goes by, and there's a new prime minister. The man's name was Haman. Now, Haman was the second most powerful man in the entire empire, and therefore the second most powerful man in the entire world. But although he was second most powerful, he was the number 1 most influential. See, Xerxes really focused his time and energy on wine, women, and song. Haman actually is the man who ran the empire. He was the one who made the big decisions. And when Haman would walk through the palace courtyards with his might and his wealth and his riches and his influence, everybody else would bow down before him. It was like the inverse of a wave you'd see at a football game. Everybody just sort of all bow down before him. And Haman, his might and his splendor would walk through, except one guy over there wouldn't. Now, at first, it would be beneath Haman's dignity to notice that one idiot over there. Everybody else bowed down. But day after day, that one guy, like a sliver or a splinter, just dug deeper and deeper into his mind. Until one day, he talked to one of his assistants. Who is that man over there who refuses to bow to me? Well, he says, that's Mordecai. He's a Jew. They're funny people. They don't bow to anybody. That's just their thing. Well, it turns out Haman was an Amalekite. And the Amalekites had a blood feud with the Israelites for 1,000 years. And when Haman found out that Mordecai was a Jew, he was consumed with hatred. And he decided, I'm going to kill that man. I'm going to kill everybody who looks like that man. I'm going to kill everybody who lives on his street. In fact, I'm going to kill every man, woman, and child from Israel, no matter where they are. Every single Jew on the planet will be destroyed and utterly erased from the memory of man. Well, Haman went home, and he had a dark pagan shrine that he consulted. And he called upon the dark names of foul gods, conjured up demonic spirits, and he used the type of sorcery to communicate with these demonic spirits using kind of a dice called Purim. And so, communing with these dark spirits, he wanted to know when was the right time to attack and exterminate the Jews. And according to the Purim, the right time was going to be March the 7th. Now, It was April 17th. So March the 7th was 11 months away. But that's okay. That would give Haman the time to plan. And he would plan very carefully. Well, to enact his plan, he has to get thumbs up from the king. So he heads off to the palace. And once again, everybody's bowing down before him, except that one guy. And he steams across and he gets to the threshold of the king's chambers. And then all of a sudden, his countenance changes from anger and offense to care and compassion. And he goes in, he says, "Dear king, I have just found shocking news. There are people here who've infested our kingdom, who are not loyal to you. They refuse to bow down before your glory. I was shocked to find out this as you are. They undermine you. They're dangerous and they have to be eliminated. King, I was so shocked and so upset with this news, I've decided to dedicate $150 million of my own money to do this." Now, the Bible doesn't actually say $150 million. It says 10,000 talents of silver, which works out to 340 metric tons of silver at $14 an ounce. Ounces into pounds, pounds into kilograms, kilograms into metric tons, times 340, switch into Canadian dollars, about 150 million. Well, the king, again, he's involved with his wine, women, and song, and he says, "Oh, yeah, well, you know what? Do whatever you want. Here, take my signet ring, write whatever law, and you handle the problem." And so Haman drafts this law that on March 7th next year, every single Jew in the empire will be killed. And as a bonus incentive, if you kill a Jew, you get to take his stuff. And Haman was planning on killing a lot of Jews. Well, news fans out upon the empire. And right there in Susa, all of a sudden, this spontaneous weeping and wailing and mourning erupts from the streets as people realize of this coming apocalypse, this Holocaust that is going to be visited upon the Jewish people. And as the weeping and the mourning breaks out into the streets high above, the Bible tells us, as the voices lift, we find Haman, goblet in hand, toasting to his absolute victory. Well, the next day, Mordecai, one of many, has torn his clothes. He's covered himself in ashes and mourning. And some of Queen Esther's servants see him. And they report back to Queen Esther, "Queen Esther, we saw your cousin Mordecai, like he's running around half naked in the street." And she says, "Well, give him some clothes." And so they come back to give him some clothes. And he says, No. Tell Queen Esther what's happened. Tell Queen Esther she has to go to the king and save our people. Well, the message comes back to Queen Esther. And Queen Esther, of course, is shocked at everything. But what do you mean, go to the king? There is no go to the king. Going to the king when he hasn't called for you is an automatic death sentence. It's a capital crime to go to the king. You might think I'm all the queen and all, but you know what? He's got lots of queens. Many of them much younger than I am. He hasn't seen me in ages. I'm yesterday's news. I can't just go to the king. And Mordecai responds. And he responds with a question. A dangerous question. He says, "Who is to say that you weren't born for a time such as this? Who is to say that you were not made queen for a time such as this? Who is to say the events in your life were not for some greater purpose, that you are in the place you are right now for a time such as this?" Who's to say that you weren't born for a time such as this? Of all the eras of history you could have been born in, you were born in this one. All the countries you could be living in, you are here. All the families you could have, you have specifically the one you do. Who's to say that's not an accident? It is my absolute conviction that we were created on purpose for a purpose. It's my absolute conviction that there's a reason why we're here. Our lives have meaning because our lives have an author. Our world keeps giving this message that, our lives are accidental. Our lives have no meaning. They have no inherent value. That we can just adopt this sort of this vacuous hedonism. And the only thing we can have to do with our lives is just a self-pleasure. Consume more, consume more. You know what? We're not here for a long time, so let's have a good time. That's all we do. We raise our kids that way. In fact, most parents, what's the number one goal for my kids? For them to be happy. Not for them to be good, not for them to be great, not to make an impact, but just, we want them to be happy. Now, happy's better than unhappy, but there's got to be more to life than that. Right. Ephesians chapter 2, verse 10 tells us that you are God's masterwork, renewed in Christ in order to do good works that God has prepared for you long ago. Long before you were born, God knew about you, planned you, gave you a destiny. Our sermon series is about heroes. And I said this before, that when you were little and you wrapped a towel around your neck and then you put your underwear over on the outside of your pants and you were pretending you're a superhero? Okay, some of us remember that. There's meaning in that. That the movies, the stories that we like have to do with heroism. God has placed that in your hearts. Philippians chapter 2 tells us that God puts those kinds of desires in our hearts. There's a reason. Some of you might remember James and John approach Jesus, and they tell Jesus, we want to be great. We want to stand, in your kingdom, we want to be on your left-hand side and your right-hand side. And all the disciples, they're upset. Who do these guys think they are? Jesus, rebuke them. And Jesus doesn't. He doesn't get after them for desiring to be great. Instead, he actually tells them how to be great. How do you be great? Who is the greatest of you all? It's the one who's the servant of you all. We are placed here to do something. Our lives are supposed to matter. Remember Jesus at the Sermon on the Mount. Who did he say was the light of the world? He said, you are the light of the world. He said, you are the salt of the earth. We are supposed to live lives of consequence, lives that make a difference. And that's true for you, it's true for me, and it was true of Queen Esther. Well, Queen Esther hears this challenge from Mordecai. And up until this, all the events of her life, she's just been carried away sort of on the waves of history. But now she's going to make a decision. She has all the wealth, she has all the luxury, but she's going to risk it all. She's going to risk death in order to do something. And so she tells Mordecai to pray and to fast. Same with her servants for 3 days. And then on the third day, she goes to approach the king. She dresses up in her finest, that if she's going to die, she's going to die attempting something great. And she walks into that king's chamber, and everyone is astonished. They're shocked that anyone would dare come to the king uninvited. The king himself is shocked. What's going on here? He's bewildered. This must be something serious. And so he waves off the automatic death penalty. And he says, what is it that you want? What's so serious that you would come and see me? That you break the law like this? And Esther says, my king, I would love for you and Haman to attend a banquet of my choosing tomorrow night. Well, Xerxes says, you're such a tease. I love you, woman. All right, I'll see you tomorrow night at this banquet. And so the next night comes, and now's the banquet. Okay, what's the big reveal here? Okay, what do you really want from me? I'll give it to you. And she says, I want you and Haman to come to another banquet tomorrow night. Okay, another banquet tomorrow night. Now, Haman right now, he's feeling pretty good. Not only is he the most powerful man in the empire, but he's getting invited, to stuff right in the center of the king's own family. He's looking good, he's feeling good. And he marches out of that banquet, and he's going home, and he's seeing everybody bow, except for that one guy. Gets home, and he's with his friends, and he's bragging about how rich he is and how awesome he is, and everybody's saying, oh yeah, you're the man, Haman. And he says, yeah, but I just can't stand that Mordecai. I can't wait to March 7th. Well, some of his friends and his own wife says, well, you don't have to wait March 7th to kill Mordecai. Why don't you kill him now? Here, we got, stuff. Why don't we build some gallows here? And so, that's a good idea. Let's build some gallows, 75 feet high. Now, most of our English translations say gallows, which gives us actually a bit of a wrong picture in our mind. I mean, we hear gallows and we think, oh, well, we're thinking about like the Old West, with a noose and someone dangling like, an ornament from a Christmas tree. That's not how it worked in Persia. When you were hung in Persia, you weren't hung like an ornament. You were hung like meat on a hook. What they would do is they'd take this very long, in this case 75-foot long spear, and they would impale you and then lift you up while you're still alive, lift you up high, and then you would slowly die in agony for all to see. And so that night, Haman oversees the construction of this magnificent device of torture and death. Meanwhile, back at the palace, Xerxes can't sleep. I don't know what his issue was. Maybe this whole thing with the banquets, or, what does that woman got up her sleeve? But he's tossing, he's turning, he's tossing, he's turning. He doesn't know what to do. It's 3 a.m, it's 4 a.m. And he's trying to think, okay, what was really put me to sleep as a kid? History class. So he calls out his servants, get me some history books and read me some history. And so they say, okay, in the 4th year of your reign, O king, blah, 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 blah. And he gets to that point when there was the assassination attempt on his life. He says, oh yeah, I remember those guys. Yeah, we killed them good. Whatever happened to that Mordecai guy who found out about this plot? Did we do anything for him? And they said, nothing was done for him, king. Really, nothing? If you save a stray dog, maybe we'd do nothing for you. But for someone who saves the life of the most valuable person who ever lived, we do nothing for that? Am I worth nothing? Oh, no, king. Yeah, we should probably do something. And the king is thinking, what should we do? What honor is befitting someone who saves my life? And the king paces back and forth. He doesn't know. Well, morning has already come. Haman leaves home, going to the palace. He needs permission from the king to kill Mordecai. And so Haman struts in. He's coming into the palace. And as the king is writing, okay, how do we thank Mordecai? Haman walks into the room and says, King, I have a favor to ask. And the king says, oh, no. Can you hang on just a second? Haman, I've got a problem here. And you're that guy with all the ideas. You can help me. Oh, Haman, of course I can help you, sir. He says, how do I honor a man who's really, really pleased me? Well, Haman thinking who is the man? I'll tell you how to honor the man who's pleased you, king. Place your royal crown upon his head. Place your royal robes upon his shoulders. Place him on your royal steed and have your highest official parade him through the capital, loudly proclaiming, 'This is how the king honors a man who pleases him.'" And King Xerxes looks at him and says, "Yes, that's an awesome idea. I knew you were the guy. Yes, do that exactly what you said. I want you to do that for Mordecai the Jew." And Haman's, "What? Mordecai the... And so, Mordecai gets a crown. He gets a robe, gets on the steed, and then King Xerxes says, "And who's the greatest official in my empire? You! You lead him." So Haman leads Mordecai through the streets. And lots of people know that, isn't that the same Mordecai you were talking about killing last night? Haman is humiliated. He gets home, complains to his wife, "What am I going to do?" And she says, "Well, maybe this killing all the Jews thing was a bad idea." Well, Haman says, "Well, at least I've got the banquet tonight." So he gets back into his finest, goes to this banquet, there with Queen Esther and King Xerxes. And King Xerxes asks, "Okay, Queen, what's up?" And she says, "King, there is a murder plot against my life. There's someone who's plotting to kill me." And the king is shocked. "Really?" Haman's shocked. "Who wants to kill Queen Esther?" And she says, "And not only me, but my whole family. In fact, my whole people are going to be killed, annihilated, and destroyed." Actually, it says that in the Bible. Killed, annihilated, and destroyed. All three things. Well, the king's outraged. Who would do such a thing against my queen? Haman, he's shocked. Who would do such a thing against the queen? And Queen Esther says, "Haman is plotting to do this." And Haman's, "I was going to just kill the Jew." Oh, no. Oh, no. Queen Esther's a Jew. Well, the king is furious. "Why, you lousy, I can't, and he storms off. Well, Haman, he knows he's in trouble. And he goes over to the queen's couch, and he gets down on his knees, and he falls on her, and he pleads, "Please, please, please, save me. I'm sorry. Well, the king comes back into the room and sees Haman lying on top of his wife. If he was mad before, he's really mad now. He says, "What, are you going to assault my wife right in front of my eyes? What am I going to do with you?" And off on the side, there was a servant who just said, "Sire, I have an idea. Haman just built gallows 75 feet high today to kill Mordecai, the guy who saved your life." And the king, for the first time, knew exactly what to do. He says, "I've got other plans for those gallows." And ultimately, the Jewish people were saved. And to this day, they celebrate a festival called the Festival of Purim to remember this time of salvation. Now, if that teenage orphan girl can make such a big difference, can you? What happens when we lay hold of that destiny that God has made for us? The destiny that God's word says that we have. God has told us that we are, each of us, made in his image. We were made to do great things. We were made to make a difference. We're not supposed to live meaningless lives. We're not supposed to live pointless lives. Well, the first thing we need to do if we want to lay hold of that destiny is we need to follow the one who gave us the destiny. Part of destiny is destination. And we're not going to experience that destination. We're not going to experience that destiny as long as we're going our own way. The first thing we need to do is turn around from doing our own thing in our own way and just the devoted life of self-pleasure and say, "Okay, I will follow you. I'll put my life, my hopes, my dreams, my aspirations in your hands, oh God." And following God doesn't mean, well, I'll follow you until I find something I disagree with and then I'm going back my own way. or I'll follow you as long as you're coming the same direction I am. That's not what it's about. Putting your faith in God means faith enough to obey, especially on those occasions when it's hard to obey, when we think we know what's right, when we think we know what's best. That's when we follow him. That's when we obey him. As Christians, sometimes say, well, I did that. You know what? I gave my life to God, and you know, I did follow him. Well, according to the book of Galatians, we live the Christian life the same way we became Christians in the first place, by following him. We continue to do that. How do we find out what God's calling is on our life? I don't think it's supposed to be a mystery. I think it's supposed to be kind of obvious. Remember, I mentioned how in the second chapter of Philippians, it says that God has given you desires in your heart. God has already placed something on your heart, a passion or a compassion for something. It's already there. Maybe it's a passion for children. Maybe it's a passion for seniors. Maybe it's a passion for people in another country. Maybe you just love people from the Philippines. I mean, I do. These people are great. They're so happy. They're so friendly. They even sing when they talk. Hello, how are you? I love those guys. They're awesome. You know, maybe there's somebody out there that you really love. God has placed that on your heart. Well, chances are, if God has given you a profound desire, maybe it's for music, maybe it's for art, maybe it's for something, he's probably also given you some gifts, natural talents, abilities that are lining up with that. And if he's given you gifts, others have seen those gifts too. And that's kind of important because, you know, all of us have seen at least one episode of American Idol where someone comes in and talks about, it's my dream to sing. La, 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 la. You know what? Every person who does that, behind them is a lousy friend. A lousy friend who didn't tell them what their gifts were. So, you know, we are capable of self-delusion, so listen. But if you've got other people who are affirming those gifts you have passions lined up, you know, chances are, if you look back in your life, God has already been giving you experiences to equip you. God doesn't wait for you to clue into what the calling is. God's already been at work in you. He's already been giving you experiences and training to do what you've been born to do. And right now before you, there's going to be one of two things. Either an opportunity to act, to begin doing what God has placed on your heart, or an opportunity to train, to get ready to do. All of us are supposed to live lives of consequence, lives that matter, lives that make a difference. And through him, nothing is impossible. Through him, we have strength to do all things. Will you bow with me in prayer? Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for what you've done for us. Thank you so much for rescuing us, for redeeming us. Thank you so much for calling us. Lord, I pray that you open our eyes right now, that we might see you, that we might understand your plan and calling on our lives. Give us the faith and the strength to follow you. In your name I pray.